So welcome to this very first webinar for our Inclusive Education Special Interests Group at ECIS of this school year. And we're absolutely delighted that Eleni is going to be taking us through her presentation, which has the most extraordinary title that it's got to be interesting, because we're all questioning, what is this going to be about? Lovely that so many people have signed up to come today. We are recording the session, so if you don't get to see it today, you'll be watching it from our media archives. Welcome to ECIS. The Inclusive Education Special Interest Group is extraordinarily active and has a wonderful committee who are committed to the work that they do in bringing us together in this professional learning community, in this opportunity for networking with one another. Take a look at the events page on our ECIS website, and you'll get some details, and you can register your interest in the conference that the Inclusive Education Group are putting together at the moment as we speak for March next year in Athens. We're looking forward so much to being able to see each other face to face in that context again. So a very big welcome to everybody, and do feel free to put in the chat who you are and where you're from, so that we can see. If you want to put your cameras on, we'd be delighted to see who we're talking to. If that's not possible, we understand that as well. But I'm going to hand over to the very lovely Eleni for your presentation today. Eleni is on the committee of this special interest group. Eleni.
Welcome, everyone. I have the habit to welcome you one by one. So welcome to Chris, Nicola, Daniel, Sarah, Deborah, Fidan. It's Fidan, right? Fidan, okay. Marianne, and of course a huge thank to Sarah Kuke, who has been a heart of the ECIS learning support groups. Interest groups, and of the Inclusive Education Group as well, and to Joe and Abby at ECIS, because there are lots of people that work behind ECIS to bring all those and organize all those wonderful events, lots of conferences, and it's wonderful to be part of the ECIS family. Really, really wonderful. Chris, welcome. Chris is here. Chris Parakis is chair of the ECIS Inclusive Education Group, which was also we added on our title, but also on our factions and activities, the title Social Emotional Learning and Behavioral Support, especially with the pandemic, the social media storm that we are in, the metaverse that is coming. We have to boost our skills regarding social emotional learning and child protection as well in our online world. So a little bit of housekeeping items. Before I begin and start, as Sarah said before, please feel free to put in a chat where are you from, where you're connecting from, and also if you have any questions. At the end, we will have a discussion. In the middle of the presentation, there are two case studies to share. If you like to share something, please do so with having in mind confidentiality, protecting confidentiality of your students in your schools, and do so in an anonymous way. Yeah, we can always talk and discuss about the core of a case and find solutions. So we will first of all look at the big picture, zoom out, where we are, who we are, what are the circumstances of our world now, and then we will gradually zoom in behavioral needs in schools through the lens of a myth. We'll talk about functional behavioral analysis. Functional behavioral analysis has been around for 30 years. Its components and characteristics. We will see principles of ethical moral practice of learning support teachers, inclusive educators, school counselors, and I'm sure we have a rich variety of people and professions here in the group today. Some considerations regarding child support and child protection, and of course we will circle back to our myth. And I would say myths are important. Myths are the core fabric of societies. Why do people construct myths? Well, there are artifacts of a culture. They convey meaning. They are a narrative about how things happen or should happen. They have embedded principles and morals of society, of people, of groups, of communities, of organizations, of schools as well. Every school has a narrative, which is apparent in the mission statements of the school. But let's go and zoom out a little bit. This comes from Human Development United Nations report, just released, I think 3 days ago. It's online for you to access it. It's very interesting. We invite you to read it or to skim it through. It's user-friendly and highlights some very important developments, negative and positive, because always crises are opportunities in our world today. So I will read. We live in a world of worry. The ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, which has driven reversals in human development in almost every country and continues to spin off variants unpredictably. And we can see this in schools. They predicted around the prognosis was that the students and learners in schools around the world have missed around 6 points of their learning, equivalent to the 2 years of pandemic that they had online learning. So significant reversal in learning and human development, as well as, of course, brain development, and most importantly, social, emotional development of our learners. War in Ukraine and elsewhere, more human suffering and a shifting geopolitical order and strained multilateral system. We observe record-breaking temperatures, fires and storms, each an alarm bell from planetary systems increasingly out of whack, increasingly out of order, out of balance. Acute crises are giving way to chronic, layered, interactive uncertainties at the global scale, painting a picture of us uncertain times and unsettled lives. And this is important to know then what we are navigating. Yeah, we are in the waves of a storm. So very important to zoom out and highlight this, be aware cognitively, intellectually, and be ready as well mentally. And we will see how this plays out in ourselves, because we are connected in a system. So we do view, and we have to view ecosystemically, our lives and our work and professions. We are not islands, as we say often in our groups and in our discussions. So the uncertainties of the Anthropocene are expected to undermine people's mental well-being through 4 main pathways: traumatizing events, physical illnesses, general climate anxiety, and food insecurity and energy, food and energy insecurity as well. And we know, as educators in our schools, we have been witnesses of decline in mental health and well-being of our students. And we have seen a lot of behavioral manifestations, a lot of new manifestations in our learners' behaviors, which take a lot of forms. And we have to act from a humanistic and humane principle, and to apply, of course, fairness, justice, and inclusive way of thinking and practicing. A new uncertainty complex then was characterized in the convergence of all those trends and all those stressors, where people are in the Anthropocene, but also, if we zoom in again, we are starting to zoom in now, in the communities, in countries, in capitals of the world, in small groups, in schools, in families, in small circles. They feel those stressors affecting them in a multimodal way, behaviorally, socially, learning, and emotionally as well, and mentally. So we have to learn to navigate this new uncertainty complex. I'm Greek, and hence when we say crisis, in ancient Greek, crisis means decision. You have to take a decision. So you see there, the meaning in the word itself is that when you're in a crisis, really it's about taking a decision. So it moves you mentally and intellectually one step ahead of the game. It calls and it invites you to act, to decide, to think, to analyze the factors or the functions in your setting and your context, and to act proactively and take a decision. A decision, of course, to navigate and to be resilient and to, if you fall, to stand up again. So if we zoom in from our in our lenses, looking now in the schools, in communities, in families, and groups of people, mental and physical well-being has been in decline, and we are seeing reversals. We have been seeing reversals for a long time now in the well-being of children and adolescents, as well as in their groups as families. Critical incidents also, we have to define, we have to be careful and thorough when we are defining critical incidents as situations outside a normal frame of reference. Exempli gratia, mental health incidents, natural disasters, violence, suicide, attempted suicide, self-harm, death, injury, and so forth. I would also add, of course, grief and loss that can happen. And we have the war, we had the pandemic with a lot of losses in life. So we are talking about, and we're discussing, we are speaking, we are proposing that we should see all this through the collective trauma. This is a collective trauma of us as a community. Common reactions to trauma and could be emotional. People feel anger, feel stress, they blame, they have intrusive thoughts, they play the blame game, or they guilt trip, as we say, other people. There is a physical pain, sleepiness, feeling as a cold spring, a flight or fight feeling, difficulty, of course, difficulty in sleeping, behavioral also, and spiritual. Same manifestation of critical incidents, but also traumas, and an aspect of collective trauma as well is and are the upheavals that the United Nations or other institutions or other observers around the world, but also we can see that as well as just observers or readers in our society, are that we expect societal, community, and school upheavals. Especially with the food insecurity and energy insecurity, but also as the war and the COVID, the pandemic, and mental health decline have exacerbated the need to redefine ourselves. Redefinition sometimes happens through violence. People will redefine themselves, will seek to redefine themselves through violence. Personal distress can lead to behavioral and mental, of course, mental health manifestations. And don't forget, in schools, but also in our life, we have two broad categories about when we talk about behaviors: the externalizing behaviors and the internalizing behaviors. And when we talk about externalizing, of course, we are talking about behavioral or violent, sort of violent behavioral manifestations in schools, since we are talking about educational settings. Just before I go to the next slide, to let you know that there are school-wide tools the school counselors can apply them, and they can screen the whole school for externalizing and internalizing behaviors. If you liaise with your school counselors in your schools, they will know how to help kind of screen the school, your school or your education institution for externalizing and or internalizing behaviors. This gives us valid data. It's called data mining, because we from big sets of data in databases, we get data on and evidence on students' behavior and also mental health as well. So let's go to our myth now. There are the myth of Apollo and Cassandra. The most popular version, there are different versions, that God Apollo felt, let's say, attracted and wanted by Cassandra, and wanted to give the gift of prophecy to her. Because Cassandra denied him, she broke the trust. because of that, he placed a curse on her. No one will believe her words or her predictions. So we have an advancement from a person to another person, and then we have a punishment because we broke, or the other person, the one part in the equation broke the trust. We will come back to this. Again, as we said, myths are narratives. They have a meaning, they have a connection, they give us information about relationships, modes of relationships, and they convey critical meanings about behaviors and punishment. And in ancient Greek mythology is full, full of myths regarding behavior and punishment. The myth of Cassandra, of course, is the root of a modern syndrome and metaphor. When we say this is the complex of or the syndrome of Cassandra, is when you're being disbelieved. So any alarms and any warnings, the prophets in your society, for example, or someone tries to ring, they're being disbelieved. So very important myth in ancient Greek mythology as well. And we do invite you to read myths of all cultures, not just Greece, of all societies, as they convey critical meaning. And of course, going back to myths is very important as we try to redefine who we are. Humanism is a rational way to go back to basics, but not also that, go back to the human as the most important cell of a society, again from an ecological point of view. We are all connected. So very important to look at the myths. The behavior of students and learners, the behavior of our spouses or our friends is a signal, is a warning. All behavior is communication. All behavior is language. And same in schools, by the same token in schools, we are seeing manifestations of behavior in 4 broad categories that you can see on the slide. Lately, a lot of escape and or avoidance. That's why we have a lot of tardiness. Students are either late or there are a lot of absences in schools. This also should be taken as a behavior. Seeking attention as well, or more externalizing forms of behavior, like, of course, violent. People storming out of the classes or staying in the bathrooms in the toilets for no reason. And this is where I think educators, we should have our antennas ready to understand and to signal the alarm if we see students being absent for prolonged periods of time, either being in school but not in our classes, or being at home. Now, of course, when I have critical incidents in schools, the learning support teams, the school counselors, the crisis intervention teams will apply interventions that should be best evidence-based and are effective. Most importantly, there is an immediacy, the immediacy aspect of an intervention, where you don't wait. You collect data, you apply skills that we will analyze in a while, and you bring teams into discussing the critical incident of the case of the student. And of course, you take action. What makes an effective emotional behavioral intervention in school is, first of all, if it is consistent with ecological perspective. And of course, we are referring to psychological safety, psychological ecology here, connection, and taking into account the relationship and the emotional connection of peers, of teachers to students, staff to staff, and in the ecosystem of the school, because the school is an ecosystem with its own rules, and of course, as we said, its own cultures, its own myth, its own artifacts. Taking into consideration factoring in all of those aspects is very important. Second, that was the first criterion. Second criterion is that the intervention we implement has a documented evidence of effectiveness. The ECIS lately has taken a great direction in being research and evidence-based. A lot of conferences, articles, presentations. We do see the need to and the direction to have more research and evidence-based presentations, contributions, and that's lovely. Going back to science, going back to which is counter to fake and fakeness in our world. So very, very important to look through a research lens. A third criterion, alignment with the function of the problem. What is the causality? What is the causation? And we have to be careful there with the correlation. As you say, causation is not correlation. What is the causal variable? What is the cause of the behavior of a student? Very critical action and activity in the behavioral intervention phase of defining the problem. What is exactly the problem? And am I looking at the right aspect of it? Emphasis on a proactive approach, immediacy, as we said, immediacy, fidelity, follow-up, coming from a proactive approach, and a prevention as well, preventive approach. And our intervention is capable of class-wide application, it's user-friendly, and it can be applied using regular classroom resources. It doesn't require extravagant resources to be applied. It's something that we can do right now, right here, with what we have in our hands. Important intervention skills for behavioral problems. As we said, immediacy, research, applying criteria, systems thinking, data collection and analysis, data mining from databases. If there is a screening tool that was implemented and conducted in the school, the teams should sit down and analyze the data. System thinking, so decision when you have critical incidents. I think lately there's been a call for all schools to have a necessity, actually, unfortunately because of the critical incidents, to have teams applying crisis protocols, debriefing protocols for the students and for the staff. A great example was, again, ECIS acted immediately after the war to support students, learners, staff in the conflict areas, and giving resources, giving guidance, and first of all, lending a hand, an arm to all those people. And that's important. So immediacy, fidelity, follow-up, research-based, and systems thinking when we are lending our supportive, our support. Implementation phase is very important. Evaluation, review. MTSS, let me know if you know this term. This is a multi-tile system support by where you categorize your students according to their needs. And I would also add, very important, self-assessing, auditing, applying post-mortems for cases, where you sit with your team as learning support, school counselor, SLT, senior leadership team, and you discuss on past cases and self-assess your skills, yourselves, and other critical aspects of the intervention phase. Two examples of the wonderful books around. I also have added in my last slides. On my last slide, I have books on behavioral management, and this is a page from a book where you collected, and we use this at MSF at my school, when we have to apply intervention. Before that, when we have to screen the class for any behavioral issues and to find the cause. Functional behavioral analysis, as we said, has been around for 30 years. It receives a lot of new versions and new revisions. Its strength is the fact that you, first of all, isolate the causation, the causable variables in a problematic situation. looking, of course, from a neutral point of view, from as much as possible, again, I would say as much as possible, objective point and point of view, to look into what exactly is the problem, what are the aspects of the problem, and what are the parts of the problem as well. It could be something at home, it could be something in school, it could be bullying that is not, we can't see, it could be personal, intrapersonal or interpersonal factors that affect the student and hence manifesting this behavior. This is a critical research phase. Then we have to do the assessment of severity. Is the student a danger to himself, herself, themselves, or others? That's another. Is the student learning on support, in therapy, on medication, on pharmacology? Do we have any pre-existing conditions? Is there any diagnostic data? Is there any diagnosis? And so forth. The phase in the functional behavior analysis comes after is the data collection and evidence on behavior. And this is very important because we have then to define the frequency of the behavior, the nature of the behavior, and of course the critical questions: when, why, what, who, how, when this manifests. I would like to make an important note now. If we have school counselors in our group, but even if we don't have educators, general educators, it's important to always not take your personal notes in any interaction you might have with a student. If a student comes to you to confide in you problems and issues, it's good that you take notes. These are your personal notes. This is because you can quote directly, and I say this from a child protection officer point of view as well. You can quote directly to and have evidence of a problem that was reported to you. This is important for us to know that at any point we might be witnesses, and also at any point we might be reporters of a child protection case or of a behavioral issue or bullying and so forth. And of course, I'm referring to cyberbullying as well. The next phase is decision on intervention. Who are the actors, the key players, specific roles and responsibilities, and of course considerations. And we have some slides on considerations later because it's a critical point where we have to factor in a lot of aspects, a lot of factors, a lot of things. And the last phase, as we said, evaluation of our actions, our skills, and evaluation of the efficacy of the intervention we apply.
Eleni, can I just interrupt you before you go into your next slide? I don't know if it's just me, but it's very quiet.
Okay.
So if it's possible for you to just speak a little bit more loudly,
yes,
that would be really
absolutely
great.
Thank you,
Bless
Sarah.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, just to let you know. Thank you.
Thank you. That's lovely. Thank you. Any questions you might have, please put them in the chat. So from principles and values, we move to practices, processes, and protocols. It's good to remember that. And this is what we see also with policies. Policies are our principles and values, and guidelines are the practice and process and protocols in the school. Very important to remember this distinction and this direction from one point to the other. Is almost linear here. So principles of intervening when we have emotional behavioral disorders and difficulties. First of all, a note on laws, policies, and ethics in critical incidents and crises when with regards to behavioral problems. Those are ambiguous and contextual in nature. Sarah, let me know if I'm still have in low voice or I did a little bit better.
It's quite quiet, but it is a little better. Thank you.
It's a little better. Okay, good. So laws, thank you so much, Sarah. Laws codify a value or a set of values. Laws and their interpretation differ from one geographic location to the other. And also, and not to remember that civil law versus common or unwritten law, those are counter. Sometimes they're antithetical to each other. Ethics now, there's a big difference, are agreed upon values governing the conduct of professional members of an organization or a school educational institution and reflect the changing nature of the profession. ethical standards apply to all members. And of course, we have a lot of ethical dilemmas when we work with students and minors. And they exist because there is more than one right answer. Hence, an ethical decision-making empowers the best choice that we can give, yeah? Given the context, the best choice we can take, given the context and the situation, the circumstances of the incident, be it behavioral or any other, and deserves examination from multiple perspectives. These are not on laws and principle and ethics. Now, of course, moving a little bit as in a kind of a deep dive motion, the complications of working with minors in a school, and you can see the list. First of all, counselors or learning support or general educator values. That's number one. These are the complications we have to factor in. Your obligation to act. Yeah, we have the moral, the ethical, and the legal obligation to act. Minors' developmental and chronological levels should be known by the educators and, of course, by the parents. I would add here brain development as well. In adolescence, the brain has not developed yet fully. We have to take this into account. Why? Because their ability to absorb changes or to absorb tensions or to absorb even assumptions, even language, meaning is severely weakened at this point. So it will be developed later on. Another factor, the privacy rights of minors, the legal status of minors, the fact that educators and staff are in loco parentis in a school. If you are parents, you know that we should be thinking from a standpoint of view of a parent that they are under a protection in schools. Therefore, we always check attendance. We always should know where they are. Everyone, but especially those with mental health issues and mental health difficulties. We should know and we should be aware of the community and institutional standards that we have to abide by and we have to look at always. Academic instruction as well and learning. Building trusting relationships. Our students, but also our teachers, our co-teachers don't have to like us, but they have to trust us. We have to trust each other. Trust is a higher value. And it's good to revisit that again and to remember, especially in the context of our unsettled lives and uncertain times. Informed consent, of course, of a minor, for child protection officers, for educators, for learning support teachers when there is a behavioral management issue or a class management issue too. It's good to know where and to be aware of those skills are needed in order to navigate the issues like informed consent, like defamation, like slander. For example, writing an email to parents or describing a situation should be as neutral as possible. And of course, you have always be careful how to describe an incident to anyone. The opacity of laws and ethical codes to do with transparency, number of students to support. This is very important when we have a big school with not so many teachers, how easy and how effective would be to address behavioral issues and problems. And of course, standards of child protection and care in schools. 5 moral principles now, yeah? And when we refer to moral principles, we refer to beliefs of assumption that are shared or agreed upon by professionals in a community, and they guide their ethical reasoning. So students, and this is about students, all those 5 moral principles. So autonomy, their autonomy and their independence as well, we have to respect, as well as remember that they are minors. So we might have to take decision on their behalf if this is for their well-being. The beneficence towards students, doing good. The non-maleficence, not doing harm, yes, avoiding harm. These are not the same. Justice and fairness, and loyalty or fidelity, staying connected with your students and learners, with your supported students as a learning support teacher, with your mentees as your mentor, or with your students you counsel in SEL, or if you're a therapist, if we have any therapists today in our group, with your clients in therapy or in counseling. So five moral principles to guide your reasoning and your decision making. And when we are in front of a critical incident with regards to behavior, as we say today, first of all, we have to construct solutions. And we can have 7 steps in mind when we are doing this. First of all, define the problem emotionally and intellectually, cognitively. With a note here, try to be as non-judgmental as possible. Emotions are not always a safe way to approach situations, so remove the emotional side, which can be immense for when we are, for example, in an injury, or we have self-harm, or we have a behavioral situation with bullying, cyberbullying towards another student. So define the problem emotionally and intellectually, but remove it from your judgment when you have to take a decision. However, you have to know the emotional aspect of the problem. What is the emotional aspect and the status of the student, either as a victim or as a perpetrator. Apply ethical standards of your profession. Consider the student's chronological and developmental levels in brain development, mental development, social development as well. Consider the setting, the parental rights and minors' rights. Apply the moral principles here. Determine your potential courses of action. Have a plan in mind. And evaluate again, self-assess yourself, evaluate the plan, action, and self-assess via postmortems or audits of your documents, your protocols, sitting with the teams and discussing about a past case. Working on putting aside some time to work on specific case studies that can be found in research. Also would provide a skill that will be used and a way of thinking, a mindset ready to be used when you have a situation like that, which might have not been, it might be novice for you, might be something new. Considerations. We're gonna do a little bit of discussion now, if you like. So we're gonna look at the court case. This comes from Ethics and Law. This is a book from ASCA, Association of School Counselors in US, and they have analyzed 100 court cases which involved minors and counselors, teachers, and a lot of those courts are about behavioral issues and violence in schools. So I'll read for you. Greg was not promoted to 9th grade because he did nothing, according to his teachers, plus exhibited patterns of disruptive behavior. His parents argue that he should be promoted because failure to do work was a result of his disability. He's diagnosed as mildly ADHD. Greg's parents, the principal, his advisor teacher, and you hold a joint conference and at the end of the course of the conference, there is a typo here. You explain to Greg's parents that he is lazy and interested only in social life. Greg's parents bring suit against you for defamation and slander. Yeah, how will the court rule? Let's open a little bit the discussion here. I'm sure we have a little bit of time. What do you think? What are the factors that the educator or the learning support teacher or the team member of the support teams or the school counselor should really be taken into consideration? Who would like to go first? Any ideas from your schools and your experience?
Hi, Eleni. I'm Marianne DeRosa.
Hello.
I'm actually from the United States, so it's the law in the United States, federal law, to take the student's IEP and disability into consideration but I'm not sure if that applies to independent international schools.
And Marianne, thank you so much. You had a case like that or a similar case like that before?
Yeah, I have. But as a special educator, I'm like the advocate of the students. I'm always with the parents and the stakeholders. I think that for example, in my international schools in the past, I've had this sort of attitude, of the leadership. They don't want to pass the student because they haven't completed the work and they don't take into account the disability.
Or
But
diagnosis, right? If it's a
right,
diagnosis,
exactly.
the diagnostic considerations
Right.
as well as the course of action recommended by the therapist or the evaluator.
Exactly.
And Marianne, you're a school counselor?
I'm a special
Special
educator.
education teacher. Okay, great. So
For learning support,
learning support.
but also a variety of roles, data coordinator. So
Fantastic.
anyway, yeah, but
That gives you
just putting on my educator hat on right now,
okay.
thinking about this case, it is interesting because you do have it occur, I think, mainly in independent schools because I don't think they're attached to the law.
Yeah. I think that staff in international schools should be aware of the local laws in which they operate, as well as of the moral principles and ethical principles, really, that should inform their decision making and practice as well. Thank you, Maria. Thank you so much. So I would say personally, if you permit, there's lots of issues with with the court case and the way it's laid out, the way it's described. I would say not so much of inclusive language as well, but the fact, as you correctly said, not to punish people for the diagnosis or their weaknesses, as well as the people they are not the diagnosis. Okay, so a lot of issues here when we are considering a case of a student. Another case now regarding decision. Anyone else wanted to contribute? Sorry if I'm going too fast. Let's see. No one. Okay, perfect. So let's go to another case now. Clifton is quiet, brooding young man, almost void of peer interaction, who rarely speaks. And when he does speak, his comments are negative and sarcastic. It reminds me of someone, actually. I have this case. I had multiple cases like that. His remarks are often related to others' incompetence. He has been known to become violent when he feels pushed, and other students say, "Don't mess with Clifton, he's crazy." You catch yourself avoiding the student in corridors, which will be very normal. Yeah, we are humans. Where, if anywhere, do you go with this information? What would you do as educators, learning support teachers, special education teachers, school counselors, psychologists? What do you think? Who would like to go? What would be your first course of action here? Who would like to share if you had similar situations in your schools? Because I had this and it is complex. There are different factors and different course of actions you can take, but you need to take them more ethical and more oral, and it needs to be informed by inclusion. Marianne, would you like to share again?
Sure.
I'm calling on you.
Thanks, Eleni. No, I was just thinking about who Clifton has the greatest relationship with. As you were saying, it's all about building relationships with the students and making sure the student feels like a sense of belonging in the school. So I guess that's where I would go to if it's the classroom teacher. Usually, it's triage. If you're the classroom teacher, you're usually the first point of contact with the student and the student's problems and parents. And
yes, true. Maria, thank you so much. Also, I would add, first of all, do we have any pre-existing conditions here with Clifton, like before with Greg? That's one. That they were not communicated. Sometimes parents in international schools don't always communicate. It is, to an extent, it is their right. However, the educators and learning support teams in schools should know well before the student is admitted in the school if there is an issue, so he or she or they can be supported. I would say, first of all, that would be a question. Of course, as you said, a person to go to, Marianne, that's very, very critical, because this is the one critical factor for a student, a learner, and anyone really to be supported, us as well, yeah, us included as well. I would say, what is the cause of the violent behavior? When he feels pushed is something that really opens for me an investigative, let's say, I want to take this from an investigative point of a standpoint, and investigate why and research why this is happening. And he's been isolated, clearly. Students either say, don't mess with Clifton, he's crazy. So a lot of different factors and levels and layers here to take into account. The social debriefing should happen. The school counselor should apply debriefing sessions, counseling sessions with the group, Clifton included, not included as well. So the parents as well. So lots of factors. And again, all those cases are here to remind us how much we need to think of all factors included in every single case. We rarely see one case which is clear-cut and for us to decide, I think, in schools. Child protection, not here, very important. We have to examine, exactly as Marianne said, the nature of close relationships of the child. Parental stress and dysfunction in the family environment will impact parenting and child well-being in the school in many ways. We have to see and we have to observe and investigate the generational trauma that potentially exists. Spillover effects that further will impact life, quality of life, work, studies and work. Very important that school counselors are aware and can be trained in light CBT therapy if they are therapists. Even if not, they can receive cognitive behavioral therapy, which is trauma focused or trauma informed. Or they can establish a well-knit network of CBT professionals, or DBT, which is dialectical behavioral therapy. CBT is cognitive behavioral therapy. Is any physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse exist? Any cultural factors here regarding corporal punishment and whether it's accepted or not? I think in US, Marianne, this is a big issue, yeah, in some states. And of course, diagnostic considerations, as we said before, is there any suspected or confirmed trauma, or it is a case that has been, an assault has been confirmed and there is a perpetrator known or known. This comes from the DSM and the ICD, International Classification of Diseases and Disorders, from the World Health Organization. So, and critical note here, when we take decisions to intervene, to apply, to implement, to evaluate, to follow up, to collect data, we always have in mind the child protection note at the back of our minds as well. More nuances now. These are our last slides. One of our last slides. ADHD has is in comorbidity with, of course, emotional behavioral disorders, oppositional defiant disorders, compulsive disorder, or explosive, intermittent explosive disorder. ADHD unfortunately share common characteristics with and symptom patterns with mental health, psychiatric conditions as well. So this will mask the ability, will cloud the ability of the evaluator, all the teams, the support teams, again, school counselors, learning support teachers, interventionists, therapists. It will cloud their ability to conduct differentiator diagnosis. In other words, to say, hey, this is ADHD or ODD or both, or this is not ADHD, this is a behavioral issue, or this is not ADHD, it can be trauma, and we have then to view it from a trauma-informed viewpoint and practice, and inform our practice according to that. Another consideration is that a minor with post-traumatic disorder may demonstrate impulsivity, restlessness, fidgeting, storming out of the class, lashing out at people. So these are also symptoms of a person in a traumatic status. neurological or neurodevelopmental conditions that suddenly will come also sometimes cloud our ability to see if there's a behavioral issue or a class management issue, or is it bipolar? Is it sleep dysfunction, sleep disorder? Again, we have to think, factoring all those potential situations, potential circumstances and conditions. And the last note on ADHD is lately the sluggish cognitive tempo, which is a new way to describe some aspects of ADHD. There's been a significant research and clinical interest and discussion in conferences about sluggish cognitive tempo. And the representation in this case is done with a lot of sluggishness, sleepiness, daydreaming, and lack of motivation, which can be seen as ADHD, a full-blown, clear-cut ADHD, but it's not. That's why it was given as a separate term and label. And of course, any side effects of psychopharmacology given for other conditions, that's something to remember. Back to our myth now. We have to build a narrative and a story in our schools. We have to know where we are, what we are doing, where we are going. We have to know what is our mission as educators. This is very important. In our world of again, collective trauma, unsettled lives, and unknown, a lot of unknown factors, we have to go back and redefine who we are. So the first thing, again, building trustful relationship with people, our colleagues, people in our lives as well, our students, first of all, learners and the parents, and our leadership teams and team members, being honest and communicative and collaborative, understand that conflict will come. Okay, there's no way that conflict will not arise, because you are working on behavioral problems that are challenging, and they can be overwhelming in many ways, especially when trauma is involved or other conditions. A focus, conviction to abide, of course, by laws and regulations, but also to stay loyal and display fidelity towards beliefs and values as an educator, and have a flexibility, have this multimodality in your practice, as well as being a professional. So I think all of those elements are important for us to inform our practice. And last note that I would like to say, we don't have answers that they are ready made, and we have a book of answers. No, in no way in behavioral management or child protection or trauma-informed practice, school counseling, there are ready-made answers that we can just open the book and play by the book, as we say, and apply. It's always a research that should be done through a functional behavioral analysis, through lots of factors. So with that said, I would really like to thank you all. I have added here the books that I consult from, a lot of things from yes as well, from Hogreffe, which is an edition here in Germany. I'm based in Frankfurt. School psychology, and also ethics and law from the American School Council Association. And I don't know, Joe, we have time for some questions?
I'd like to say thank you, Eleni, for the presentation, and everyone who attended this afternoon, evening, morning, depending where you're coming from. I think our group, our SIG group, would like to unite with as many people as possible. Collaboration is a key word that we use. And we hope you will join us in future events, our monthly webinars with different topics, and of course, our long-awaited face-to-face conference after 3 years in Athens. I'm here. So I'm more than happy to greet you all. And if you need anything else, do let Eleni or I or anyone else in the SIG team send us an email. We'll be more than happy to support you and help you in any way possible.
Fantastic, Chris. Thank you so much. So we want to invite you again to Athens, a wonderful city. We're going to have a very nice conference with, if you haven't been in Greece before. If you haven't, please come. We will have a social aspect, right, Chris? We will meet. We will socialize as well. So you're all invited to come and to discuss. Even Marianne from US, if you can come, it would be wonderful. Okay, why not? So we kind of find the strength that we find in the community. So I want to thank ECIS. Chris Perakis has been the brain and the heart of ECIS. Founded actually this group, and we are indebted to her for all that her special enthusiasm in all the aspects of collaboration and work that we do together. Please follow our events and ask us questions. This is what we want. We want you to ask questions, because this would also help us understand new things and research and find things that we don't know, and to become better in what we do.
Thank you. Have a great school year, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you,
Diana.
Eleni. It was
Thank
nice to
you,
meet
Eleni.
you. Really appreciate it.
Bye, Marianne.
Thank you. Ciao, ciao. Bye.